is the Sim Pit. I'm your host, Sean Cole, and I am here with my good friends Amir, Assad, and Devin Booth, and we are here for Saturday edition of 3 Wide. I don't know why I call it Saturday edition. It's always on Saturday. We're on the wrong Saturday because of the crazy endurance schedule, but we are here for 3 Wide, which is when you get to hear more than just my yappity mouth as we take on the most important topics in sim racing, or at least the most relevant to the time topics of sim racing. Amir, Devin, how you guys doing?
Good,
Hello.
man. How are you? Hello, everybody.
I'm well. We had a really fun oval race last night. Didn't go all that well, but I mean, for me, it was the race went well, but it was fun. It was just one of those days where you don't even have the stuff, but it was still fun just being out there. And now we're here for this. So anybody who follows the show might have heard, like, the Sim Pit is not the kind of place like, oh, this is the Sim Pit opinion. No. The Sim Pit is a house, and the members of the house are all free to have their own opinions on a great many things. Products, sims, everything. And diversity is what it's all about. You know, what's my favorite place to get ice cream? Baskin Robbins. 31 flavors, man. You just endless choices, and there is no right or wrong on so many things that we talk about. People ask me about pedals, hardware, things all the time. And the bottom line is, man, whatever it takes for you to get it done, that's good enough for me. So I'm not here to tell anyone how to be, but one of the recent topics, and I think what brought it to the forefront, was Assetto Corsa Competizione on the Xbox. And how laggy the game played, and how the frame rates didn't perform like the PC counterpart. And that led me and Devin, and poor Amir's had to tolerate this for weeks now, because it hasn't stopped, debated frame rate. And is there a right frame rate? Is there a most important thing when it comes to frame rate? Is there a right or wrong? Max is on my side. He's already trying. He's like, hold me back, boss. I'll get him. I'm a frame rate snob.
Is that why he left the room?
I'm a frame rate snob. And I'll just tell mine and then I'm going to turn things over here. For me, when it comes to PC sim racing on a game that allows for such things, if I am not seeing 120 frames per second, I am not happy. When friends and people call me for tech support trying to be better at sim racing, one of the first things I'm going to point to is their frame rate. And I have even told people, hey, why don't you turn those grandstands off? Because that frame rate's killing you. And I'm just going to throw out that my minimum frame rate is 120, but I have a little flexibility there. But that's what I'm striving for as a minimum. And anything less, I'm upset. Devin, Booth, Baba Boothy, am I wrong?
Yeah, well, you're not wrong. You're just misguided, that's all.
I'm misguided.
So listen, like Sean said, I want to further a little bit with the premise. Well, because we have, like we say, we have 2 topics. We have about a half hour on each topic. We can kind of start this off straight. Like Sean said, this started with ACC, so it should be pointed out, and this is something that he didn't say yet, so I think it's a good point. You have to remember that ACC on Xbox runs at 30 FPS, and a lot of console titles suffer from this. I think you can do one setting on the new consoles where you can get 60 FPS, but if you're doing the higher resolution, you run at 30. I'm not 100% on that, but I believe that's how it is. And on the old consoles, it runs on 30. And that's the main point, I think, that of contention when this started was like, you're running on console, 30 FPS, honestly, for shooters, for anything like high pace, like you're racing and other sports kind of titles, that kind of stuff, anything competitive, 30 FPS is too low. And I think we all are 100% on that. And then we got into a bit of...
30 FPS is too slow for super hot.
Yeah, there you go. Right? Everything jitters in slow motion. Yeah, but that's solid, and I think that's fair to say, and I think we all agree on that. Sean and I got into a bit of a trolley argument, so we wanted to bring it up, and we thought it would be a good discussion for you guys and to see where we're all at. Because like we say, with the Sim Pit, we're not all like, this is our opinion, meaning this is law. This is our opinion, as in let's have a discussion, right? That's what we do with the pit stops Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That's what we do when we BS on stream and stuff like that, often in the chat and in the community. So that's kind of what we're here to do. Now, to further what Sean said, Sean says 120. I say is misguided. I'm a 60 FPS purist. As long as you're above 60 and you're maintaining consistent frame times, I'm okay with that. That's where I'm at. That's where and anything above that is golden. The point of contention became when I got called slow because I'm on 60 FPS monitors.
That's why you're slow. That is.
And for the record, I beat John in the last GT race.
So Captain Slow here. Here's where I'm coming from. I don't necessarily disagree that 60 frames is inadequate. I think where I get my snobbish attitude is for the valleys, not even for that consistent number. So if I have a machine that's going to be able to hold 120, that's great until you start an endurance race. And there's 50 cars on the grid, connections all over the world. The game's trying to put a lot of stuff together, and all of a sudden you notice what had always been 120 consistently drops down to even 80, which is still 20 higher than 60. And I guess my issue is, and maybe it's not so much the number as much as the variance that actually bothers me, because here's one thing I do believe, and I'm going to come back to why I still want 120, but here's one thing I do believe. You can acclimate to anything. So, back in the days of GPL, we were lucky to get 24 to 30 frames per second. And you make do, right? That's what we do. We're racing. I think for me, when it comes to my concept, RTA, loving the debates. Thank you very much. When I'm looking at my brain, so I'll give you a great example. To me, planes should fly. The aerodynamics and the concept of a plane works in my brain, my common sense engineering. Boats should not float, however. I understand displacement. I'm not trying to switch the argument. I'm just saying my brain processes things certain ways. So when I think of sim racing and I'm like, all right, so the game's running on the computer, making calculations. And then it's going to send that information to my steering wheel and simultaneously send it to my monitor. Now, I'm reacting already at a delay because the real action was on the computer. I've already got a delay. There is a synchronization between all of our equipment, and to me it comes down to the lowest common denominator. Whatever your slowest thing is, whether it's your monitor, your wheel, whatever is part of that whole package. It's if you put a giant carburetor on a car and don't change the exhaust, you don't get the benefits because it's all a balance and it all goes to the lowest common denominator. So if your exhaust pipe's this big, it doesn't matter how big a carb you put on the car. And so when I'm demanding super high frame rates, it's because I want the synchronization as much as the visuals that go with the frame rate. So that's one part where I really do. And when I play games at lower frame rates, even at 60, I feel like it just inherently has a little more lag time. And I have no numbers, right? I don't have a multimeter here. This is just me. But I just feel like even at 60 consistently, I feel like there's an inherent lag compared to at 120. But I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. It's the whole package that bothers me there. That's one part.
So you brought up a really good point with that, and this is so me being I'm the frame rate snob, to be honest. Sean is a frame rate snob in the sense that he wants the best. I'm the one who will argue the details for it. And there's a point that you brought up that's extremely important, and there's actually testing. So if you guys want to look, you can check out. There's a few different things. One of the tests that I'm going to reference was actually done in two parts. You guys all know Linus, I'm assuming. from Linus Tech Tips. He did an FPS test where they did first-person shooters as well as some fighting games, and they separated at various tests, and they used various frame rates. They used professional players and that kind of thing. That'll give you a lot of where what I'm saying comes from, and a lot of that is like anecdotal that we've all figured out ourselves. They just proved it was kind of the premise with the test. So if you want to watch those, you can. But in particular, this with the frame pacing, you mentioned timing in between the frames. That's an important thing. You could have 120 FPS or you can have 60 FPS. But if your frame timings are bouncing between 11 milliseconds between the frames and 18 milliseconds or 21 milliseconds between the frames, you're getting half frames, you're getting partial frames. You end up with tearing, which is, I know somebody, Transwarp in chat mentioned VSync. That's a lot of the reason why people will use VSync, because you're trying to avoid tearing, getting half frames where the top part of the monitor gives you one frame and the bottom gives you another. And all of those kind of things come down to frame pacing. And that's I think the most important part, and I'm 100% with you. There's no argument there. Consistent frame pacing is the true defining factor in this. Now, you can get used to 60 FPS or 120, but if your frame pacing is not consistent, you're not going to be consistent yourself.
Now, is it smoother at a faster rate? I mean, now, I'm not saying whether that's faster or better. I'm just saying, when it comes to like jaggies and things like that, isn't the smoothness of the video better at a higher frame rate? Not that would translate into speed, though.
It does. So the theory and the example used is they take a static camera and they watch an enemy come around a corner in an FPS game. And in the 60 FPS, there's going to be a gap in time of roughly 11 milliseconds between the character's frame showing up at the corner and then almost past the corner because he's running, right? So in a racing scenario, you can imagine there's a car next to you on the right, his hood's there, and then there's a gap before his hood is in the next spot. The argument for me is that at 60 FPS, that gap is so insignificant that you as a human can acclimatize because of all of the latency that you're talking about with your wheel already and everything else. Your latency is already about that point. So if you're 60 FPS, that gap is pretty insignificant. If you're at 30 FPS though, that gap starts to become a point where you're actually running into problems. And then again, if you're at 120 FPS, you're used to 120, so you're acclimatized to seeing that car at every moment. When that car jags because your frame timing drops and all of a sudden you're at 60 or in your case 80 FPS in an endurance race, you're going to notice that and it's going to impede you. So it's the consistency that matters, not my argument, rather than the actual frame rate itself.
Right. That makes sense. And I do believe firmly that you can acclimate to anything if you play your game, and that's part of the game. You're playing on a latency, you're playing on a delay, you're playing a game backward from real life physics from the very starting point, even in the best scenario. Because in real life, the timing is, there is no lag. You know, any lag is built into the mechanical parts of the car. But your steering wheel is active, the tire's contact patch with the ground is active, and they are connected. There could be a delay. But I mean, in sim racing, you know, I hate to bum people out, but you're always playing behind the game or predicting to an extent. Because it's just, there's a communication delay from game to wheel to game, and then the game reacts. Because you think about your car, you turn the wheel and it instantly reacts. The game, we're going back and forth with communication, which doesn't really happen the same way. Okay, so let me take this back to a single application. Let's just take my computer, for example. Maybe not a great example, but let's just say that I wanted all the eye candy on, and I can run about 60-ish. But at the start of races, it dips down to, let's say, 45, because I was at 60, and now it dropped to 45. And to me, that's a 25% decrease, which, and this is where I start to get a little paranoid on frame rates, for being truthful. When I'm in that bouncing time, I feel like the timing of the game is changing, not just the frame rate and visual, but all of that communication is doing this chasing time all the time. When I'm at 120 and it drops a certain amount of frames, it's going to be a lower percentage than when you're only dealing with a 60 count. and I guess I'm not using my computer as an example because I'm really using the example of somebody who's struggling. I have a friend who literally runs on a single screen and he turns the grandstands off. And in his case, it's so that he can be somewhere between 90 and 120 frames as his normal. Versus, I'm sure if he locked it at 60, he might be able to bring on grandstands. I can't imagine racing without grandstands, by the way. But if I was struggling for frame rate, I'd do it.
I turned mine on as well.
All right, so I have a supercomputer, and there are a few graphics that I don't have maxed out, and I'm sitting here demanding 120. So if you're in my shoes, do you crank everything to the maximum of maximums and lock it at 60? I could make an argument for locked frames, by the way. Because everything I'm talking about, the things that upset me, the variances and things like... You can cover your mouth and do that, Amir.
Oh no, it was a joke, man. I'm just sitting back and watching, just hearing you guys two chat. That's all, man.
All right. Well, the reason you've been quiet is because we've both been presenting our arguments, and now you need to put your powder wig on, and you are the judge.
Okay. I mean, so no, I mean, because we're chatting, because we've been talking about this topic for I think 3 weeks now, and you guys are arguing your sides, and I'm just sitting back and like, I really don't care as long as I can get my 60 frames.
What number was that though?
Yeah,
that was the key right there. As long as I could get my 60 FPS.
So I mean, but because both of you guys bring up great points on your topics, because so I get Sean, you're used to having your frames at 120 locked, and anytime it dips below that, when you lose 20-30 frames, it's going to affect what your action speeds are. And I mean, every time we do an endurance race, I'm sitting there scared because I'm looking at my FPS. It's going from, because my monitors do 140, you'll go from 120 down to 90, down to 80. Then once the race, everybody's loaded up, it's like at 40 for a couple of minutes. I'm like, oh crap, like I'm lagging really bad now because I spent all of practice being used to 100, between 90 to 120. Now all of a sudden it's 40 FPS. Now I got to get my brain used to that. For me, I prefer if we could get games, if we can get it up to 120, 60, but it needs to be a locked 60, because that's what if we could get something that your brain's used to instead of this constant dipping and diving. So that's to me where frame rate pace. I'm more about frame rate pacing. That part. Because again, doing the endurance race, I hate it when I'm used to 90, then all of a sudden it dips below, and I got cars around me, and they're all starting to bounce all over the place. I'm starting to freak out because I'm not used to it. So that's my argument. All so right. You guys have fun with your guys' debate about.
It sounded like you definitely are more on Booth's side, because you did say the magic number 60. So Joe had brought up, where did this magic number 60? I mean, I know that's a capturing frame rate.
So there's a reason for 60, and there's actually just a couple points. Before we get into that part, there was one question asked that I wanted to answer real quick, because we keep mentioning frame pacing, and at least one bro doesn't know what frame pacing or is learning about what frame pacing is. So there you go, perfect. Sean's couple bros. So if you want to learn more about this, I implore you, when you're looking for your next upgrade for a graphics card or a CPU, go watch Gamers Nexus on YouTube. There's a guy named Steve. He does a really good testing methodology. It's all proven. He's very highly regarded in the community, and you can check all that if you're interested and you want to verify it. But if you want to take our word for it, Gamers Nexus is somebody to watch. He does a lot of stuff on frame pacing. You can actually just type in frame pacing, Gamers Nexus, and you'll get a video all about it. But every time he does a video, he'll show you the frame pacing of the graphics cards that they're testing, not just the frame rate. And what that gives you, and what Sean's talking about with the stutters, is actually covered in that kind of stuff. You have 1% and 0.1% lows. The 1% lows are what matter when we're talking about the stutter. When you see a graphics card test and you go to look at your new test, it's Tech Jesus, exactly, RTA. When you go to look at a test, you're going to see the frame rate over time, which will be 60 or 120 or whatever it is that the card's capturing. And then you're going to see a 1% low. And if that 1% low is in the 50s, then 1% of the time you're in the 50s, right? Which isn't too bad if you're at 60. But if you're at 120, and 1% of the time you're in the 50s, then that's going to be a noticeable stutter. You're going to see that stutter. And adversely, if you're at 60 and that 1% is at 30, that's going to be a noticeable stutter. And what that is your frame pacing, and I believe it's 11 milliseconds. I do mess up the numbers sometimes, so pardon me if I'm off a bit. But I believe at 60 FPS, it's 11 milliseconds between each frame. So each time you have a stutter where a frame is dropped, that 11 milliseconds is changed. If you could imagine everything's coming at 11 milliseconds, your eyes are seeing it, it's consistent, and then all of a sudden you have 15 milliseconds and then 18 and then 14 and then 13 as it tries to get back to 11. That's the stutter that you're seeing. So you can be running 60 FPS and it can be delivering that 60 FPS, but because it's trying to maintain that 11 milliseconds and that's bouncing around there, you're still seeing problems. You're still seeing stutter. So it's the frame time consistency is what actually matters. And again, that's Gamers Nexus if you're interested and you want to look more.
That makes sense based on what I see. So again, if I'm at 120 and I dip down to 90, which would be a 25% hit, by the way, it translates as a stutter to me. So even though 90 is 30 above what we would want as our minimum, it's sort of somewhat irrelevant because I still get a stutter. And that stutter is what literally causes me to miss a brake mark. Miss a turn-in point.
You come in, there's a bunch of grass and a bunch of signs or crowds, or grandstands when you're coming up to the pits, like the Nordschleife. You come up to the pits, there's a hard right-hand corner in front of the grandstands, and your frame rate dips to 30.
Yeah, well, and you're doing 200 miles an hour down the backstretch, and trying to nail your braking zone down to within, millimeters of feet of where you want it to be. And if a rabbit farted, that would be too much distraction, right? And let alone a frame glitch, or pause or glitch or whatever you want to call it. Because even if it's smooth, just the slowdown enough is enough for me to feel distracted. And whether it's and again, this is where there's a potential for placebo too. You see that stutter and you're convinced that your controls have all gone to shit.
Yep.
I am, but hey, I admit I'm an old dude. We struggled to get frame rates for so long that was our battle, and there have been many. If you think back, and I'm not. Well, no, I'm kind of an internet snob too. I have more bandwidth than I need, and why? Well, because back in the day when it was. When you could count the numbers on one hand, when you're on a 1440 and a 28.8 came out. But back when you were playing lower than what was needed, it became everything. Whereas now we've exceeded those numbers by a number in the case of internet, for the most part, where it's an irrelevant number that you don't even have to address or talk about for the most part. Unless you're the guy lagging. But, but I'm still not there on frames. If I could get my thing to say 240, I'd be happy. If there was a way to buy I have a 2080 Ti. If I could buy a card that gave me 240, I'd do it.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't if you had the money, right? There was one other thing that you kind of mentioned that I wanted to touch on before we finish this, which we're doing pretty good. I would say we had a pretty amicable discussion about it. But you asked about where the 60 FPS number comes from.
Oh, that's right.
So there is actually a reason for that, and you touched on it actually talking about older stuff. So I believe it was 24 FPS. I know that's recorded video, but I believe that's what the original monitors were running too. It's just tech. So we got to 30 FPS. 30 FPS was a standard with 720, and then you had 720p and 60 FPS as well as HD came out, right? So you have these standards, and I think it's like 59 point something and 24.95 or something like that for a Europe group. So if I'm misquoting Europe, I apologize. American, it's 30 and 60 instead of the point. But either way, these are standards. So the 59 point whatever or the 60 whatever that you hear people talking about consistently as the lowest frame rate that is acceptable, that's because of the standards. technically, I mean, 56 FPS or 64 FPS would be just as good, right? As long as the frame pacing is consistent. But because the standard is 60 and things are built to run at 60, recorded at 60, rendered at 60, that's why 60 became that standard, right? So depending on where you're at with your tech, your monitor, or your TV or whatever it is that you're running at, again, Sean's on 120 hertz displays. I'm on 60 hertz displays. If you're on 144 or 240 hertz displays, that correlates to the frame rate that you should be using because that's your standard. So when we hear 60, it's not because 60 is the absolute lowest. You could probably go a smaller, lower. I'd imagine, based on most people's experience with VR in particular, 45 would probably be fine. 45 is the warp frame when you're running a typical VR headset. It runs at 90 FPS. When it can't sustain that 90, it runs at 45. And if you're running at consistent warp frames at 45, most people are fine with that. So 45 FPS on a single screen is probably fine, but because the standard is 60, that's why you hear the number 60. So it's a bit of an arbitrary number in a sense, but it's been standardized at this point. So that's the answer to that. I can't remember who asked, but that's where 60 comes from.
All right. So, Amir, are you going to go change your graphics for higher frame rates?
I mean, I could do up to 144 on my monitors. I keep it.
No, I was saying, have I convinced you?
No. As long as I can have pretty graphics and stable frame rate, that's all that matters to me.
Yeah, I'm a whore. I want the graphics.
I want to, like Dave Blair was saying, I want to see that. I want to see that naked girl that's in the grain stains. I don't want to turn that off.
You can't see the dimple in her butt cheek under the bikini. You're doing it wrong.
Thank you. You guys said things that I don't need to say now. Thank you.
No, I get to that. I was like, and this other thing too, like, because I mean, PS4 Deadman brought up a good point too. Is, I mean, you can have all the frame rates in the world that shows on your display when you're playing your games, but if your monitors or cables can't support it, then that frame rate's not even going to matter anyway. So like when we're talking, he was brought up like 120 and 60 hertz on TVs. Most TVs I think can only do 60 hertz. So even if you're trying to push more than that, it's not going to matter because no matter how much you push, your video card or PC could push, your monitors can only do 60 hertz, and that's all you're going to see no matter what.
Just a good tip for those of you that are like that, if that's a curiosity for you, if you have a 60 hertz display, locking it at 60 isn't necessarily going to be the best for you, because if your computer can maintain above 60 and you're actually throttling it down to 60, it'll do this weird thing where it'll bounce between 58 and 60 trying to maintain it, and you might actually end up with tearing. So lock it to 65 or 70 or 75. And give yourself that extra little bit of headroom. What that does is it gives you a consistent number above, but not so high that you're receiving tearing. Sometimes you'll find that unlocking it helps as well, depending on what you're playing. But that is a good idea when you do want to lock something. Instead of using VSync, if the option is there, lock it to 10 or 15 frames above the frame rate above the hertz on your TV. It'll tend to help you out a little bit.
People still use VSync?
Well,
yeah.
Do you use
Accuforce for competizione?
I don't know.
Yeah.
ACC in particular, if you guys are noticing any problems with ACC for streaming, apparently if you're getting some jittery, VSync can fix the jitter when you're streaming.
Huh. Because I mean, because I was watching Sean, like me playing ACC, I never noticed the tearing on ACC, but when Sean was doing his reviews on the console portion,
console.
On the console, I'm like, because that was like, I guess because we're gonna go back into that argument. Previous is like, to me, I was starting to get headaches from watching Sean's review on ACC, like how bad the frame rate was going between when he was alone on track and then when he was around a bunch of cars, or when he was crashing, quite a few times.
It's because at 120 FPS, he should have been
right. He's used to 120. He's like, oh crap, I'm at 60 now. I can't drive.
I was like flying blind. I mean.
But to me, that was weird, just seeing like the graphics jumping back and forth and also the frame rate jumping back and forth. I'm like, I can't even, like that, I cannot play. There's just no way I could play a game like that.
So I had said I'd buy a video card to get that. Well, at the same time, I could turn things down, and I don't. So I do flirt with danger despite my snobbery. Because, my machine runs probably between... it actually jumps around a lot more. Well, I mean, I'm using all conditions. Somewhere between 90 and 160 is my open numbers. I rarely see below 90. But, yeah. I don't know. I still can't do it. I still can't turn it down. I know on certain games that I'm playing, I'm still putting things down here and there to maintain, and I can't stop it. I too would buy I'll buy the 3000 series when they're reasonable, to make sure. I don't know. I don't think there's any way you can stop me from doing that. I do wonder, and I guess that's where I'd want the jumbo card, because what I'd like to do is lock it at, you said go a few over your hertz. You know, I'm on 120 hertz monitors. Cool. Let's lock that at 130, and I'd be super duper happy guy. Might be paying for a lot of unneeded resources. I think that's also, this to me also comes back to one of my theories about computers that has gone on for 30 years now. But rather than overclock, my idea was, no, why don't you just buy enough hardware that you don't need to overclock? You know, like to me, overclocking goes back to when you didn't have enough computer, not taking too much computer and trying to get more out of it. And it's like, well, no, just buy a big enough computer and it'll last you forever. You overclock it and it will not. So again, a lot of these things for me are still admittedly old dog, new trick kind of things, you know. Anyway, all right. So what's the minimum? The minimum is you better be seeing over 60. Are we all in agreement
that's
there?
What my recommended would be. My recommended for me is if you can see over 60, you're good.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Well, Assetto Corsa locked at 60 on the Xbox. It just needed to keep turning things on and off in order to do that, and it was highly. That's almost as disturbing as a stutter, by the way, when like things like shadows are coming and going. So, all right. Any other thoughts on this one? Devin, you're the one with far more fact than anybody else. I'm just the old man. Amir's pretty content.
Again, if you want, if you want a good look at it, go take a look at Gamers Nexus. One point that is made in the chat there that we can kind of touch on real quick before we move on. Sim Invader says frame rate is CPU dependent, not GPU. That's incorrect, but correct. That's true in this day and age for the most part. If you have a new CPU and you're running like 4K, that's where you get bottlenecked, right? So CPU can give you more frame rate in that sense. But if you're running at 60 FPS, then your a good graphics card and a half decent CPU is going to get you over 60 no matter what. So you're fine. You can run 100 whatever. 200 whatever frame rates with a good graphics card and a mediocre CPU if you're running at 1080. But if you're at, again, high like 4K, or if you're running VR, then yes, it does start to become CPU dependent. So it is good to point that out.
All right.
And we're good.
Good. That's it. All right, there you go. Now you have a source for more information. You have your bare bones minimum, and chances are, as long as you're over 60, you shouldn't be panicking unless your name is Sean Cole.
Then you turn into Kevin Slow.
And then I'd be I'd quit. I'd be like, 60, I can't go on. All right. So a couple weeks ago, we had, if you're stoned enough, 5 FPS is good enough. All right. So a couple weeks ago, we had the Circuit de Barcelona, 12 hours of Barcelona. I think we had 2 official and 1 sister team for the Sim Pit running. Brother team? I didn't mean to call you guys sisters. We had 3 teams associated with our crew running. And if I'm not mistaken, all 3 cars were basically beaten to hell by everyone else, not us. And not to pat ourselves, we run real clean cars. We have good drivers who put the time in to run consistent laps and do smart things on track. All 3 of our cars were taken out. I don't even like to point a finger like that, but you know what? This is a few races in a row now that I've been involved in cars where, I don't know if you guys remember the Spa pile up. I really wish I had a replay of that. Max, we've been out twice already, buddy. What's up?
Just go back and watch the streams for those and see the damage that happened.
So, why are people doing it so wrong? Why now? there's so many things to take on. Is there an etiquette? I mean, is there a reason anyone should actually? It's a race, right? What is the dynamic of a race? Green flag, checkered flag. First one there wins. That is racing. Does it matter? I'm just throwing some things out. I got my own opinion. I'm just throwing some thoughts out there. Does it matter how you treat an endurance race? Like, is there an obligation to literally treat it any differently? I mean, in the rule book, absolutely not. That's one thing that comes to mind. The other thing that comes to mind, and I watched this happen over the last 10, 20 years of watching, like, real-life endurance racing. I would tell you that 10 or 20 years ago in the professional ranks, they drove endurance races like it was tough to get to the end. And when I watch modern endurance racing, I watch them sprint race a 24-hour race. And it is balls to the wall by every team on the track until it's over. And I think that's not sustainable, but yet that's the pace that they push. So, I don't know. I'm still a little rubbed wrong by what's happened to the SimPit teams over the last few races. And again, we're the guys who are determined just to finish no matter what. We're the guys who are determined to be the clean car on the track. And time after time over the last recent times, we've been ejected from the race one way or another. So let's start at the beginning. Do you treat an endurance race differently? Is there a moral, social obligation to be any different?
I think at the beginning of the race, I mean, even getting before into the race, I firmly believe, yes, there's two different etiquettes where you got to get into between sprint racing and endurance racing. Sprint races, they're meant to be short-term races where, yeah, you're driving 95 to 100% of the time within your skill level, because your whole point there is you're racing against other cars to finish the X amount of laps. Whereas endurance racing, you're racing against the clock. You're racing against, if it's a 6-hour, 12-hour, 24-hour race, you're racing against the clock, and you got to try to put in as many laps as you can before the end of the race. And I think people go in the mindset of the first part because they're so used to sprint racing that they fail to realize that there's other people that are running their own race, their own strategies in endurance racing, where in sprint racing, everybody has the same strategy. You see it in iRacing. Everybody pits when their fuel runs out and they add special fuel, they go back out and race. Whereas in endurance racing, people are trying to strategize and are different pit stops working. They put their drivers in specific stints because they know not everybody's equal in their speeds. So there's a lot of planning that goes into it that you don't do in sprint racing. That's just one of them. I don't know if Devin's got more to add before. I thought this is topics near and dear to me because I've been wanting to talk about this for almost a year now since we started endurance racing. So
no, I'm with you, dude. I'm gonna say very much so the same. It's two different types of races, and people need to learn to chill out. I think you know how there's like a gentleman's rule for most things. I think that in it's not written like Sean says, but there's kind of an unspoken rule where if you're doing an endurance race, it's the long haul, and most of the people tend to know that. Like by the end of an endurance race, when you're like 2-3 hours before the end and the group gets chatty, you got all those people that are sleep deprived, hanging out, captaining the crews and stuff like that. It starts to come out, and most people are like, "Yeah, man, we made it. This is good." But there's always that like handful of just cussing morons.
Well, here's the thing for me. Like when I think of an endurance race, it's like a team could come in and literally take the I'll call it the Tortuga strategy, the turtle strategy. And we're going to run very conservative engine mapping. We're going to be looking to stretch every stint by 1, 2, 3 laps over some other teams and what they might be doing with their mapping. We're not concerned about times because we're off the pace to begin with. We're running a lot of wing because we always want to be in control. And we're playing the long game, knowing that it's a 24-hour race, knowing that there's psycho crazies out there who will take themselves and others out of the race. And that all bodes well for the turtle. But the turtle plan doesn't really have room for extra repairs. Those guys can't be the victim of other people's craziness and still... Because you're right. And I think there is a difference. Like in a sprint race, every race you could say, sure, green flag, checkered flag, it's a timed race, right? I mean, if it doesn't matter how many laps, it's the quickest time wins the race. But in an endurance race, the math isn't quite that simple because you are doing it for such a sustained period of time. A lot of wang. I love my wang. No, so I mean, you're really in an endurance race far more than a sprint race. It is a race, a personal race against the clock, right? Because every mistake is going to add up. Every aggressive move can also add up. You know, those times where you push through traffic, but you're risking. What about, you know, Devin wrote some notes before the race practice. How often do you see guys out there and you're like, I know that guy didn't put in enough laps?
I didn't write those notes.
Oh, are those Amir notes? I'm sorry, Amir. I'm sorry.
But yes, practice.
Oh, you could tell from the first lap who practices and who doesn't practice, because the ones that don't practice, they're the ones that are crashing out within the first 2-3 laps. You can tell by how aggressive they are. You can tell by how they're braking, how they're bobbing and weaving within traffic, that they just don't care. And then when they crash, you know, a couple seconds later, you see them logging off the server. I think that happened to us in Daytona. I remember that was really rough for me because we passed a few guys and there was a guy behind us. He didn't even bother braking. We were going around I want to say the second corner, the second horseshoe, and he just didn't even bother braking, just rammed into us. We tried to finish our race, and he just, within a couple of seconds, he was done. That was frustrating. So yeah, you can tell when people put in practice by how they race, and that's the first thing. I mean, sprint races, you just jump in. Dave Blair's going to hate me for this because Dave Blair doesn't do any practice. I'm calling you out, Dave. That's why he does. That's why he doesn't have time to do it, but that's why he jumps into sprint races because you can just go in, do your race, and get out. But endurance races, you need to put into practice because you want to have those consistent laps over and over and over again. Whereas, you know, if you make a mistake or two in a sprint race, it's a little bit more forgiving, I guess, per se. Whereas, again, you're racing against the clock in an endurance race. So you want to maximize the amount of time you got.
You know, what you said about Dave Blair, and Dave, sorry, buddy. You are Dave Danger, no tire Blair. You are the star of today's show. You know, Dave might not put in that practice. And this is the difference. And I don't know where I'm rubbed wrong by what I see on track by others, but I've never seen Dave put his car where it didn't belong and hurt somebody. So despite not having the laps under his belt, he respects that and drives around that to an extent.
Yep.
And so, I mean, yeah, everybody should put the time in. I mean, when it comes to endurance racing, I kind of, when I see somebody that I feel doesn't have enough laps to like know the driving line, I really get a little upset. Like, I don't say it publicly because, you know, you gotta watch what you say in this world, but it's just like, really? You know, there's your average endurance race on iRacing has 50 teams. Teams are usually 4 drive. You have 200 people out here, and you're out here not knowing what you're doing. That's kind of inexcusable. And I don't think there's a difference. I saw a comment from Joa earlier saying whether it's lap 2 or 200, it doesn't matter. You know, your actions are always the same. I do agree, but I know that my mindset changes because I leave a much bigger cushion around me during an endurance race. Like, you know what makes me happy in an endurance race? When I can get a nice safety bubble and no one too close in front or behind. I like to actually, even though I love racing, I actually like to be all alone in an endurance race where I can put in my laps, not make any mistakes, and not be forced to take any risks. That's my happy place in an endurance race. Now, I mean, you can't always have that, but man, the things that have happened to us in the last few races, and I look at Amir's great notes here, and no, before the race, practice. Yeah, I mean, if you don't practice, you can't get to number 2, knowing what your friggin' limits are. And here's the other thing. I see
And David knows those very well.
That was a good point.
What?
Oh, just Dave. You're talking about practice, and you like. So there's a good point. Dave may not go practice for that specific event, but I'm like Dave, so I'm kind of being a little bit defensive here, where we don't necessarily practice for every sprint race, but racing those pickup races is in some forms practice, as long as you're driving the right way. So you talk about knowing your limits, looking everywhere, staying chill, right? Those kind of things. If you're practicing those kind of things, like in practice while you're racing, then you are kind of practicing. So you may not know the track in a sprint race, but you're practicing your etiquette. You're practicing your respect for the drivers around you. You're practicing your driver's knowledge, right? But with an endurance race, like we say, you need to know the damn track. It's a 12-hour race. You're going to race an hour or two of it.
Yeah.
Know what you're doing.
I also see a lot of people who, it's obvious that they ran their qualifying setup, or we're only doing like 5-lap test sessions. So even though they might have done 100 5-lap test sessions, they're unaware of how their car would act around other cars. So sometimes you're talking about, look at like a Le Mans. You could go into a braking zone, 15, 20 miles an hour faster than if you had been practicing offline. That's a different braking zone. Not to mention, now there's a car in front of you. So if you don't acknowledge that and you just rear end them, that's, to me, inexcusable. To me, like, when I think of an endurance race, I agree that your action should always be the same. But I think we all also understand that no matter what race you're in, at some point towards the end, you're like, all right, it's time to put up or shut up, right? Right? So all those niceties went out the window, right? And we all know that at some point it's go time.
It's cycle, right?
Yeah, and even in an endurance race, I mean, like, if you've been, the beauty of an endurance race is you could be 23 hours into a race, and over the last 6 hours, a battle has been developing for 6 hours long, and from the 18-hour mark, you're like, we're within a lap of that car, one spot ahead, 1 lap. And over 6 hours, you chew that back to where all of a sudden you're inside the last hour, and you're like, we're only 23 seconds back. And,
or you don't take tires, right?
Yeah, and so I know we get to a go point. But I really do believe that if I had to write the rule book, that endurance racing, I mean, I understand there's still a trophy, and call me a pussy for saying such a thing. But, an endurance racing is at least 23 hours of gentleman racing. There's no reason on earth there should be any contact at all, especially in the first hour, but at all. And then, like, if you can't make the pass, why are you even trying? And now, there's no policing such things. The rules are written the same way. White flag, checkered flag. I mean, green flag, checkered flag. That's it. That's the rule. I know in the last race, who was it? Amir said that I made you pucker because at some point I just was like, F this, and I split 2 cars into a braking zone. Or no, coming out. I think I did a few of them actually. I was actually driving.
You both did a few of them.
Well, I was driving angry at that point because I felt like we had been so abused in that race for no reason of our own fault that I was just kind of done taking it. And it's like, I'm not lifting. I'm not backing out because no one else around here does or is. And, I'm not proud of that. I'm just kind of speaking it like it is or like it was 2 weeks ago. I just had enough. I mean, and it wasn't just to me. I watched you deal with it. It just really upset
Well, and let's
me.
point it out, you're not a hot lap hero either. Right? We're talking about practice. Some people do practice, but they're hot lap heroes. All they do is practice by themselves. You're not one of those. So at least, like, when one of us is racing and it's like everybody's driving like a twat and we have no way to get around or through them without being a little bit aggressive, at least we have the practice to do it.
Right.
It's very rare that we'll dive and hit someone.
No, you're right. I guess who was it? I gotta go back and look at the notes, the chat. 'Cause somebody brought up a really good point too about practice. And because it's not just even turning laps, like you're talking about, like putting in the 4 or 5 hot laps. Like, oh yeah, I'm good. I got the fastest lap time this session. I'm good to go. You got to put in the practice with other traffic, like knowing how other people are going to react. Because it's endurance races are multi-class races, so you got to know what the faster cars are doing. You got to know what the slower cars are doing. You got to understand where they're going to pass you, how they're going to pass you.
What are these cars going by? Why are they so fast?
It's like it kills me when I see like these, like even like the slow cars. I'll see like the GTE. Like if we're racing in the Le Mans series where we got the LMP ones, HPD, and the GTEs, and I see these GTE guys blocking the LMP ones. Like, why are you even trying to block these guys? Like, these guys, are going to be there like half a second and then they're gone. Like, just get out of their way. Like, maintain a line where you're not next to them. It bugs me so much when I see people that you can tell, because you can just tell immediately that they're not practicing. So with us in the sim pit, I mean, we make it a point is when we do our practice sessions, we simulate what's happening on the track. One session will be when the race starts, the next session will be 4 hours later, and yada yada yada. But then we have our practice sessions open to anybody to join us. That way, it's not just me, Dave, or Stan, or you just in the session. Anybody could be there in any car they want. So we also get that practice to know what's going on track. It's frustrating, and then just people not knowing their limits, and that's where you get to know your limits, is by knowing what the car is doing over a full stint. Because GTEs, I hate the tire model on it, because the first couple laps you're driving on ice and you're going to be locking your brakes like crazy, but then the car starts evolving, it starts getting better, and then it starts dying again. And most people don't know how to. I've seen so many people, like, gets towards the end of the stint, the car is behaving way much differently than it was at the start, and they're losing it all over the place because they never put the practice in for it. They think, oh, it's going to behave the same way the whole entire stint. I don't know. I'm gonna go. This is because this is near and dear to my heart, so this could be like a long-winded rant for me. So.
Well, let me take it to the. Sorry, go ahead, Devin. Sorry.
No, if you're just really quickly, the LMP and HPD thing. You're talking about another point about practicing. You got LMPs, like for one, if you're a GTA, you used to be staying out of the way, right? Like you don't need to move out of the way on the entrance to a corner, but like
maintain your line.
Yeah, maintain your line. Do something expected so they know what you're going to do. And when the opportunity for them to pass is there, let them take it. Don't try to block them. But on the other side of things, you're talking about LMP and HPDs. How much does it suck when you're doing an endurance race and it's multi-class and there's an HPD that's the same speed as a GT? Like, some of these guys out there. Or the LMP dive from 10 car lengths back because their brakes are so good. Like you do have to watch. That's both ways,
I have to think, and I don't know for a fact, I could be talking out of my ass here, but I have to think that real life teams, like at Le Mans, for example, I think teams know coming off of corners whether they should be able or not to make a pass on a different car. So if an LMP is coming out of the corner, his team's like, look, we're 4 seconds back. You should be able to pass that Porsche by the end of the straight. And if they say you shouldn't be able to, he's already not worrying about trying to scare the out of both cars, right? And I rarely see that kind of heads up. Our guys, I love watching our guys race, because our guys, and I'll pat every guy who's ever raced with the Sim Pit badge on their car. Because what I see our guys do is knowing exactly, and not only not making the pass, but literally doing something so that car ahead knows, dude, just go into the corner. I'm not even making the move right now. Whether it's a flash of the lights or the way they tuck the car behind to show they're not desperately trying to dive in under braking. And when I see that from other teams, I'm really appreciative. So as one of the captains of the Sim Pit Endurance team, I'm really proud of our guys because they do what I think is essential. There's a collective thing going on in an endurance race. Yes, we're racing, but we're all trying to survive also, right? I mean, so can we do both simultaneously? And that's where I take issue with so many people. Yes, you want to win, but we all have to finish, right? And if we don't all finish, your win doesn't mean anything either. Because I only believe you win when you beat others. You know, you survive a race and there's only 8 cars left. You didn't win much. You know, you won the battle royale, but you didn't win a sim race. You know, and again, practice. You know.
You brought up one really good thing that, like, I don't think a lot of people realize as part of your practice, and just this is specifically in multi-class. This isn't so much for like if you're racing single class, but you're talking about multi-class coming out of a corner and how players are going to get past and guys, drivers, and teams are going to work together. There's one thing that you often see: people in a GTE, for instance, with an LMP1 behind them. Let's say you're coming out of the corner of a chicane. A lot of guys in a GTE that are unexperienced or inexperienced will stay slow and they'll try to pull to the left so that the GT or the LMP1 can go past them on the outside of the exit of the corner, right? Forgetting that this LMP is going to be on the gas earlier than them and probably setting up for the inside of that exit.
Right.
So when you go to give them the outside, you're actually pulling in front of them. And people don't take the opportunity to practice these things and learn these things on track. And then adversely, with a GTE versus GTE, for instance, sometimes letting them have the exit there could be a good idea if they're right on your tail. If they're a little bit behind you, you should probably assume that they're setting you up to take you on that exit and follow a standard line. And those are the kind of things you cannot learn without practicing with other cars. You can drive all your offlines, you can be a hot lap hero, you can do all these things, but until you get into those situations and you have to put yourself in them, you're not going to learn how to deal with them. And people do endurance races without.
You know, I tell you, iRacing, if not for anything, but it doesn't work for all cars because not all cars have the view required. But I'll tell you, in real life racing, there is not anything more valuable than the ability for a driver to, how many? I mean, like in Lemons, in even in open wheel, even in karting, it's like, man, I'm sick of being hounded by you, and I don't need you taking us both out. So how about you go to the left, and because I'm pointing you by, that I'm not going to fight you. So you can brake safely, enter the corner safely, and please don't spin out because I'm letting you through. That would be a nice addition in some sims, the ability to wave. Or gesture. I'd like... Sorry.
Some sims have stuff, though, right? Like, some sims have turning signals. You can flash your lights in iRacing, but it's important to mention on that point that there's going to be different rules across different sims, right? In iRacing, you are to hold your line. It's the faster car's responsibility to get past you. So when again talking about that exit, staying to the inside to let the car by, that's specifically not something you're supposed to do. Right. You're supposed to hold the racing line and allow the faster car to plan to get by you. And the methodology behind that, for those that don't understand, if the front car is trying to guess what the rear car is going to do, and you'll hear Randall McGrew in chat, you'll hear him say this often when you try to be out of the way, you're in the way.
Sure.
Because the car behind you is planning how to pass you. He sees you ahead by like 4 or 5 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever, a couple corners ahead. He's already thinking, okay, I'm coming up at him this fast. I'm noticing on this corner, I'm catching up to him really quickly on the exit, or this corner, I'm catching up to him really quickly on the entrance. So the next time you hit that corner, he's probably going to pass you on that corner. And if you do something janky because you're trying to judge what he's going to do, he's going to put it in your butt. It's not going to be comfortable for anyone involved.
The best thing you can do at all times is do what you're going to do and don't stray from it. And certainly don't change your mind. Another thing that I will do, you talked about signals. I've always not liked the flashing. Because I could get in an argument every straightaway. Like, did you flash because you're coming through, or did you flash telling me it's cool? I don't know.
I yell at people for flashing at me. I know they were.
I hate it. I hate it.
They're like, I was just saying hi.
It's like, I don't mind the flash. Like, if you flash somebody once and you know he's faster, if he flashes once, like, all right, you're giving me your intention that you want to pass. And endurance racing, and it's because that's one of my other points too. I wanted to get into. If somebody flashes at me saying he's going to move to the inside, and he's faster than me, I know he's faster than me, I'm going to let off the gas just a little bit in the corner. That way he can get by, continue on his race. But the ones that just constantly flash you and they can't pass you, that just...
Like you're obligated... to me, it's like they have some arrogance that you're obligated to just pull over and get out of the way or something. And it's like, dude, if you can't pass me, then stop flashing. Stop using that extra finger to flash and put it on the wheel and drive, right?
Right.
Now I do a different trick under braking. If I feel that if I feel that I want a car to come through, and I'm going to stay on my line, but I want them to come. Because the one thing I know is when I'm getting past, the faster I can get them to pass me, the faster I am. And my real job, if being passed, is to jump in their wind and get as much off of them coming off that corner. So for me, in order as the leading car in a slower car, I will flash my brake pedal. So even if it slows me down a touch early, but if my normal brake marker is the 2, let's just say at the 3.5, I flash my brakes twice and even start early braking. Just so it's like, even if it's just to psych them into making the pass, like, wait, this guy's braking really early, let me go through. It's like, yes, please do. But yeah, I will let LMPs know by braking early so that they can see, hey, this guy's checking up already.
Or lit, right? On the straight, just a small, not a tragic.
Yeah. You know, how
Drastic
to be passed is as important as making a pass in an endurance race, especially mixed class. You know, depending on your split, all this gets thrown out the window, of course, because how often are we in a one-make split in mixed racing environment, which is kind of nuts.
Oh, it's the same thing with if you're in the same make model too. So we've been in the same split sessions where you have guys that are half a second faster per lap in the session. So those guys are going to come at you quick, eventually as they make it around the track. You got to still follow the same etiquette too, by letting them by.
Do you think you could put red crosses on your car and be like, hey, I'm not even racy here, so you go on by. Red cross means just don't hit me. Please just don't. I'm not even going to get aggressive. I'm not going to try to do anything unless I'm blatantly faster than you. Just please don't hit me. I'm medic. Right. Oh, all right. Well, I don't really have any more on this one other than, I am not discouraged. I've been frustrated but not discouraged. So we've had a couple of bad runs. Does that stop my desire? No, not at all. Will I go into the next race any more aggressive? No. Hit me a few times and I might get angry again. I'm not going to say that won't happen again. Grunel's here. That day there made me so mad because I just think I leave a bubble. I'm not going to hit anyone from behind. And all I'm asking is no one's going to rear end me in the beginning either. And man, we got walloped from everywhere. That was the most brutal thing ever, Grunel. I know you know what I'm talking about. But
yeah. I get that. I think that's one of the other issues I see drivers have in a lot of the sims. And I don't want to point out just iRacing because I've seen it doing R Factor too, doing some of their endurance stuff, is people don't pay attention to what's going on ahead of them. It's more noticeable in iRacing because that's what the standard sim is now for multiplayer. But you see a wreck that's going on, and nobody bothers to slow down. You got the yellow flag flashing, and you got your spotter saying, hey, there's something going on, but everybody still wants to go full speed ahead into the wreck. And that is something I never understood. I don't get it. Like, if I see a yellow flag or I notice there's a wreck, I'm going to let off the gas a little bit, make sure I find a spot where I can pass safely, only to get rear-ended from somebody behind.
If your spotter's yelling at you that there's a crash up ahead, you shouldn't have to look in your rearview mirror, right? Because their spotter's doing it too. It's not like it only went over your radio. I want to address Scott Curtis. This isn't me arguing what you're saying. This gets back to my medic point, I'm pretty sure. Because I was implying that I'm not even racing. If you're not racing, why did you join the race? Yeah, okay, so I think of endurance racing as like doing the Dakar. The open world Sahara, Dakar, whatever number race that is. You're all racing. But in that race, if you're racing door to door against someone, you're an idiot, right? You're a effing... No, I'm sorry. That was our pre-show topic. But if you're door to door racing in Dakar or at Baja, you're an idiot. Because that's not what the race is about. And you're still racing. You're better off not being around another car. Everyone's seen the video of the two trucks doing the whoop-de-doos together, and they both end up rolling over And it's like, that didn't have to happen. They never made contact, but they weren't focused on the course. Endurance racing yes, we are racing door to door. It's a racetrack, not Dakar. But it is, there's a reason Rolex sponsors it. It's a clock race, you know? So...
Oh yeah, because then you bring it up, like if we're in like sprint racing, yes, you're going to race door to door, trying to gain that position on the person, because you're trying to finish the race in a certain amount of laps that's already dictated. Like with endurance racing, you're racing against the clock. The more you're racing against somebody that's next to you, that's more time you're losing to complete the X amount of laps that you're trying to complete before the end of the race. So we're not talking about we're not racing, but if you're just seeing somebody that's running a different race than you or he's faster than you, let him by as quick as he can, because all you're going to do if you're going to try to race him is ruin your race. He's going to he could possibly end up making a mistake because he's getting frustrated. Because the other point I was getting, like everybody's running different strategies in these races. So like Barcelona, so there was the top 4 or 5 guys, I think they were running a completely different strategy than us. They were pit stopping, they were changing their left side tires, but they were keeping their rights, double stinting the rights, but we were swapping all tires. So during that race, the first stint, they were much faster than us. Not much faster than us. We were about the same pace. Then they'd come in, they'd swap their tires. We'd lose time in the pits because we were swapping all 4 tires. But by the end, like halfway through their second stint, they were way much slower than us.
Right.
And we were catching up so much time on them. So when I get somebody that's trying to block us, trying to slow us down, like you're doing nothing but hurting your race and hurting our race. And in the end, one of us is going to get frustrated. And it's going to end up causing a stupid error that should have never been caused in the first place because you think that by you blocking me, you're gaining a position somehow. We're going to finish a spot ahead of me when we still got freaking 12, 16 hours left in a race.
Like this
That's
moment,
unnecessary.
like this,
Yeah.
One of my latest outrages in the world are decisions made where there is no upside. Right? Like there's only a downside, and some risk in endurance racing comes into this. It's like forcing that pass is not going to make or break your position in this race, but it is putting it at risk. So to me, there was no upside to that moment, that choice to put us both in jeopardy. Hey, I did it last race. I'm the first one to admit. I took risks that I should never have taken. In a sprint race, I do it all day long, and in an endurance race, you know what? I would do that in a sprint race inside the last 20% of the race all day long. But even in a sprint race, I want my bubble at the beginning. Just let me get this sorted. As soon as we get single file, we will find out who has it and who doesn't, in road racing.
No, you're right. Like, and that's when you want, like, towards the end of the race, when you know, hey, there is a position at stake. All right, that's when you can treat it as a sprint race. And then that's where you want to be going 100% towards, to get that. Because again, like, I think one of our races, we were 2 laps down. I think the 3rd, maybe 4th place, I can't remember. But over the course of the race, we ended up unlapping ourselves. And towards the end of the race, we were catching up to them at a really rapid rate. I don't think we ended up passing them, but we got the deficit down to 10, 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And that's when we started treating it as a sprint race, because we know, hey, we can gain a position out of this if we drive a lot harder and a lot faster.
Yep. Yep. All right. I think we've covered it.
So?
Don't be a dick.
I could go on this rant for another 2 or 3 more hours.
So just coming off the last few bad results, just to be clear though, you guys are only frustrated, not discouraged, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, frustration. Yeah, like I still love endurance racing. I'm still going to continue on pushing for it because I think we got Coda left for iRacing.
Ugh.
No. Oh, come on. I think there's a 6 hours of Sebring. I don't know if we're going to be doing the 6 hours of Sebring, but I know Coda's pretty much going to be the last one.
As well, depending on who wants.
Maybe.
How much do you think the chicane at Daytona is going to screw up the race this year?
Oh, it's just like when Charlotte introduced the Roval. Oh, yeah.
Is it going to be there? Is it because that's the NASCAR chicane? Is that going to be? I don't. That you're talking about the new chicane, yeah?
Yeah. Is that not for the 24-hour
I don't
also?
think it's going to be a part of it.
I don't know.
So it's called the NASCAR chicane. So I doubt it, but
Okay.
iRacing, man. You never know.
Never know.
Yeah, there's also 1,000 hours of butt hurt. That's one that I might do. I'm actually out for the rest of the year, except for maybe a couple if I decide to. 1,000 hours of Bathurst is one I might actually check out, or 1,000 laps rather.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm always honored to share a car with you guys. You guys are both class act, especially in endurance racing, and I think that's the thing. Man, people just bring a little class to the endurance racing. It is different. It is different. I know the rule book's the same, but it really is a different world. So I plead with you all. Practice, know your limits, look everywhere, chill, and have fun. Great notes.
And also 60 FPS is all you need.
Oh my god, you're so wrong. You're so wrong.
51 FPS.
61. 60, 69?
Because then, if you get that one frame rate drop, it might change everything.
I'm gonna go looking. I'm gonna go make sure I'm first in line for the 3080 tie. So
I'll be getting it when it comes out. I need to upgrade.
Sean's gonna be going for that 420 FPS.
Can't I? I wish we could go back to multiple video cards. I'd like 3 of them, 1 per monitor.
One per... if you want to drop that much money on that just so you can have your precious 120 FPS, I mean, who are we to stop you, buddy? It's a free country. Do what you want.
I don't have any money. I'd be taking kids for my. I'd be taking food from my kids' plates just to have monitor.
Max gonna be sitting in the background, all hungry and starving. Daddy, please feed me.
Oh, dry food for you only, buddy. Sorry. All right, you guys. This has been a fun show. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Devin, touche. We've wanted this one for a while. I think we made our points, and I think it's all relative. Yeah. Anyway, any more thoughts before we bring it to a close?
No, I think we're good. Thank you guys. I wanted to have that talk because we've been BSing about it half-assed on stream for a while. I think it was good to hash out. And like Dennis said,
fake fight. It's like brothers having just a fake fight. Like there's no argument. It's just like let's argue for no reason at all.
Well, I think what actually my objective by that was more like just kind of helping bros understand the argument. And we had a few bros that had some questions and they get it now. And that was kind of the thing. In reality, whatever works for you works for you. Consoles run at 30 and people are still good on consoles. It sucks to those of us that are used to higher. With the endurance racing, fucking practice, guys.
There you go. There you have it. Right on. All right. Oh, Amir?
No, I'll just say, I mean, I don't have anything to add to that, but no, if you guys got ideas or things you guys want us to talk about for our next 3 wide shows, I mean, just post in Discord, let us know. We're always looking for topics for anything that we probably missed, so just let us know. I think just post in I think what the Ask Sean channel in Discord, and
submit
it.
Or something like that.
Or email me, Sean.
I'm going to look right now.
Email me, Sean, SHAUN @thesimpit.com. That always works as well. And beyond that, this show is normally, if we don't have an endurance race, this show is normally the second Saturday of every month at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I believe next month we will be on the second Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. So that is our normal. We're trying to make it permanent, but, endurance racing, that was the point of today's show. We're all diehard endurance racers, so if the racing's on, the show's gotta wait. That's gonna do it for this one. Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Amir. It's always been a blast. Thank you for the great conversation to all of you out there with your great topics.
Oh, you're up there.
Yeah, we don't even know where each other are on. Hey, bye.
Evan's over there.
Guys. And thank all of you out there for the great conversation as well. So that's gonna do it. 3 wide, signing off until next time. See you later.
Later.
Take care, guys.